This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Time for us to get ready to talk Western Conference preview. We have gotten such an exciting show on tap, man. This is the great time, of the season. We get to start talking about, all 30 teams in the NBA and really dig into, the finer points about what our expectations are, and what the outcome, we might think is going to be. So I'm rolling out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's the guy that makes things happen, and we've been fortunate enough, man, whenever we do these previews, it's been good. We get good positive feedback, whether it's we doing it on our own, but we're always thankful whenever we have great guests on board to help hash out these conferences respectively.
I appreciate that. And kudos to our guests who are willing to join us, for these conference previews. Another great one in store here. Western Conference is going to be tightly contested. God knows, there's going to be some interesting conversations based on our rankings to be had here ahead. So excited to get this one going as always. Family, and hope our friends and families, friends and listeners will be tapping in and giving us their thoughts here on the Western Conference preview.
Yeah, I love how you like to tee up me being the bad guy of this whole thing.
I mean, nobody's a bad guy. I mean, you have an opinion, right? And I have an opinion,
or the crazy one. I'm suddenly the Arthur Fleck of conference preview conversations.
You bring spice to our lives, and having some varying opinions from what the norm is, I think is great podcast content. So let's keep it going.
All I want at one point, what I'm saying, hopefully we'll blow up. We'll get someone to video edit me in the Joker face coming down those steps like Arthur Fleck, man. Like, what I'm saying? My conference previews,
yeah, with the leg kick out, brother. Yeah, I can see it.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's apparently how I come in with these rankings and predictions that I drop, right? Okay. Anyway, we have a great guest to help us do our Western Conference preview. Grant Afseth, excuse me. He is one of the premier reporters that is covering the Dallas Mavericks right now. You can find him on DallasHoopsJournal.com. He will be on board in a few moments to help us break down the Western Conference. Great conversation, great content, great provider, all things, not just Mavs, but just covering the NBA. And I'm sure that he would have a vested interest in him seeing what's going on with the Western Conference. Just a little bit.
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge, right? So, yeah, we cannot wait for him to get on board so that we can get started and talk Western Conference preview. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee, the show's Twitter handle, NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Be sure to go to www.thebaselinenba.com, not to only check out the previews that we have set up, but also all of the shows that we drop. That's our home space. Be able to go there, catch all of the great content that we provide for you. And if you catch us on the YouTube channel and you see the blue and white logo, then you know that we're rocking with the 19 Media Group family. So hello to all of those on the YouTube channel. But more importantly, if you want to listen to some great quality content, great shows, go to www.19mediagroup.com. 19 Media Group be running these content streets. All right. In a few moments, we're going to bring our man, Grant Afseth, to come on and do some Western Conference preview. But before we do that, are you craving nonstop hoops action? If you are, NBA League Pass is your ticket to the ultimate basketball experience. Enjoy live games, on-demand replays, and exclusive behind-the-scenes content across a variety of devices. With NBA League Pass, you'll get more games. We're talking regular season and select playoff matchups, more features, including multi-view angles, in-depth stats, and behind-the-scenes stories. More access. Catch your favorite teams and players anytime, anywhere. Stay up with the NBA like the Baseline does. League Pass is for fans who live the game. Sign up now at link.nba.com/LP19MG. That's link.nba.com/LP19MG. Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, and with us to help break down the Western Conference, our man. He keeps a very keen eye on not just what goes on with the Dallas Mavericks, but the whole landscape of the Western Conference. Specifically, why? Because the Dallas Mavericks did some damage last year getting to the NBA Finals. And now you got to watch the whole conference in its entirety. A very tall task, but nothing that our man Grant Afseth of Dallas Hoops Journal is used to, isn't already used to. Grant, thanks for hopping on board with this, man. We know, it's been a wild ride already, and we haven't even gotten to the beginning of the season. You are all over the place, all things Dallas Mavericks, and we appreciate you taking some time out to help give us insight on what you think would be the outcome of this year's upcoming Western Conference.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Definitely one of the more interesting teams, obviously coming off the finals, adding Clay. And this whole West is kind of crazy. There's a lot of teams that want to win, not a whole lot of teams that are raising the flag for Cooper flag or chasing the flag, whatever you want to say. There's definitely going to be a lot of interesting elements to get into about, 1 through 15 for sure.
We're going to get right into, who we have depicted as the lottery teams, like those that are chasing the flag, so to speak, or trying to capture the flag, so to speak. But I really want to ask you this question real quick. And I know you'll speak in more detail about where the Dallas Mavericks are and how you see them for this upcoming season. But I'm really curious, what is the buzz really like out there in Dallas, especially coming off of that finals? Is there a believability factor in this? Or has it been bolstered by the ability for them to get a Klay Thompson? I'm not saying Klay Thompson is supposed to be, that's it. That is, but maybe the fan base has a feel about that, saying, oh, that's exactly what we needed. He's going to really help, nudge us really closer into us being that perennial favorite maybe to win the finals. Like, what's the buzz like out there in Dallas from what you've been covering so far?
Yeah, I think for the most part, members, just people around the building, I think there's a lot of optimism and excitement about adding someone like Klay Thompson because they shot very poorly in the finals. They were, with PJ Washington and Derek Jones as the main starting wings. The Celtics really, cross-matched, switched, and loaded the paint to the point where it's really tough to operate one-on-one against Drew Holiday and Derek White. And then, get the ball to an above the break open shooter, and it's miss after miss after miss. That's not the only reason why they lost by any means. They ran into a really phenomenal team that stretched them out defensively, put a lot of pressure on them, and stuck to their principles, on the other side defensively, and were able to give up the shots they wanted to give up and live with the results and won in 5 games. But, in terms of, I think just beyond just the Klay Thompson element as well, I think there's a lot of excitement from what they did at the trade deadline and how that could translate to a season-wide, level of success. Adding PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford. Last year there were times where injuries started to pile up where their centers were Dwight Powell and Grant Williams in December, late December. So I think having that rim protection for 48 minutes as an option, still having Maxi Kleber when he's healthy, to bring that small ball 5. Some people like the thought of PJ Washington maybe even filling some small ball 5 minutes. But just overall, a superstar backcourt, a sharpshooter that you can really diversify the offense more with. And, having guard depth too. Jaden Hardy, there's optimism and excitement about his potential this season, filling in, when they need him to fill in, which is actually going to be right now, considering, Dante Exum, had to undergo wrist surgery, and Spencer Dinwiddie returned as well too. So they have a little more depth than what they've had in recent years. When Luka or Kyrie went down, it's very challenging for them to overcome that. But this year, doesn't appear to be nearly that same level, of concern in such a scenario. So just a lot more depth, a lot more top end talent than what they've had to start seasons in recent years. So definitely come out the finals, a lot of high expectations and belief.
Yeah, man. I mean, it sounds like everyone is on that Mark Cuban sauce, man. They're ready to roll. They see this as all systems go. All right, so let's get right into this, Grant, and what we had depicted as our predictions for the Western Conference. And I will be as discreet and stoic as possible because I know my man Shaw is going to be chiming in on the ludicrousness of my personal selections of what was going on in the Western Conference. But ultimately what we have is our lottery teams We have the Portland Trailblazers, the Utah Jazz, and the San Antonio Spurs. And I wanted to get we wanted to get your perspective from this on, you know, how do you see this? One thing that is interesting in our other conference preview, we had spoken about over the last couple of years, there hasn't been much of an appetite about lottery teams with the intent to say this is about us trying to get like the Victor Wembanyama's or whatever the case may be. The more is the intent is let's trade around and pull players, you know, either maligned or, you know, disenfranchised, or so to speak, or on the outs, and see if maybe they can help put something together, piece something together, find a diamond in the rough, so to speak, rather than the reliance of what was coming out of the draft. This year seems like, oh, X that. It's all about what's going to be coming out of the draft. How confident are you about, you know, where these teams are if their intent is the pursuit of a, you know, Cooper Flag and Bailey and others that are being so highly touted, you know, for next year's upcoming draft?
Yeah, I think for the most part, the one I'm most, I think is probably a pretty obvious one for you guys as well too. I think Portland, there's just not too much, like I guess you could say upward trajectory right now. I think unless Scoot Henderson, really exceeds expectations beyond what he's shown in preseason, maybe Shaden Sharp or anyone like that, I still think they're pretty much 15th for me, and I think they're mostly, whether it's organic or intentional, whatever it may be, I think they're probably going to be positioned where they're, late in the season, where they end up thinking, okay, we probably are best trying to angle ourselves for the lottery. I think that's usually what, Utah has done recently as well. Like usually after the All-Star break, they get to that point where they, Lauri Markkanen starts having these injuries that pile up. He misses quite a bit of time, and other players as well too. I'm not sure if that's really what they're thinking this year. I think, they have solid pieces where they can be competitive, feel it out a little bit. And I think that's, probably the similar scenario for San Antonio, where they can feel it out a little bit. And, if they're exceeding expectations, more power to them. But if they're not after the All-Star break, then, maybe we start to see a little bit of, lengthy injury reports and long absences for the history of what those injuries may be. But I think, San Antonio, Houston, those types of teams, I think they're going to really want to compete. I just think, sometimes with them, they've just not had the ability to necessarily do it at a high level. Unless you're the Rockets and the month of March comes up, then you start to seem to really figure it out really fast. But aside from that, I think those are probably my bottom four teams. And we're probably thinking, for me personally, just mostly the Blazers seem to be the standout for the bottom of the bottom, in my opinion.
Yeah. So for those playing at home, we more or less took the aggregate of our rankings, and this is how we got to where we got to. So Grant, not as high in Houston as Cal and I were in general, but this three here now, when we talk about San Antonio, Utah, and Portland kind of being in that bottom three. So similar to our Eastern Conference preview, we feel like these teams, and I'd say primarily San Antonio and Portland, could be the teams that try to help other teams be better as they try to tank, right? So they have some pieces that other teams may be interested in one way or the other. I think San Antonio specifically, with the Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, those are guys who could, high-level veteran guys, can go and assist, a team that's a piece or two away, makes some sense. But as Grant alluded to, if they're doing well, then, hey, we hang on because Victor wants to win now. But if the Spurs have any chance of pairing up Wembanyama and Flag together, for years to come, I mean, I know Wemby would be a little bit tight about that this year because he does seem to be, a real competitor, but it may not be the worst thing, in the world. And San Antonio seems to have had pretty good luck when it comes to lotteries and number one picks, just putting that out there. From the Portland standpoint, though, Anthony Simons, don't know if he's long for this ride in Portland. DeAndre in similar, denominating, whatever you want to call him. But they got Klingon. I think Robert Williams is on this roster as well, too, former Celtic, guy who could definitely go somewhere and help somebody. So they have some pieces, too, that I think could be interested. And then you assume they build around kind of the Shaden Sharps of the world and Scoot Henderson, potentially, I think, in that mold. Utah, to me, is a little bit just too far above that right now, especially with the way Markkanen has been able to play. he's really like, if you would have said the marketing that we saw in Chicago when, especially after that second year when it was like, what happened to the guy he is now? I just wouldn't believe there was the same guy. And I think, what they got with Keontae George, even Colin Sexton to a lesser degree, they have high level guys who can compete. And if Walker Kessler decides that he actually wants to be the Walker Kessler, a better improved version from the first year, and not whatever the hell was happening last year, this Utah Jazz team is going to be a little bit too good. But as Grant alluded to, if they just said, you know what, we're going to sit people down as opposed to like really playing it out, then, maybe that changes things. Because the other thing too, I think Will Hardy's one of the better coaches in the NBA right now as well too. He's an ascending guy. And it's like sometimes the mix for what you want doesn't match the outcome because you might just be too good. But to me, Portland is the one that is just like, yeah, they have no chance. It won't be hard for them to tank.
Way
the
to
other
Vince
two might be a little bit.
You went to Vince McMahon that team, man. Damn.
No chance.
Okay. All excellent points. What I found interesting, Sean, and this is just, off the top of my head, Grant, because you may not know this, we're Celtics fans, but I honestly feel that the Boston Celtics purposely lent Robert Williams, the Time Lord, to the Portland Trailblazers for a couple of years. And we'll probably be like, let me go ahead and take him off your hands now. You're like, well, you basically lent them out on a retainer.
Well, let's put that in perspective real quickly, right? Because I think, and not to bring it back to the East, but to the largest subtractions, if you will, everyone was very concerned about Boston last year was Robert Williams and Marcus Smart. Both of those guys ended up being hurt the majority part of the seasons. So we don't even know what the returns will ultimately be. Then Portland goes ahead and make a move to get Clinging in there behind Ayton, and Robert Williams is like, what? But Williams is already hurt going into the preseason yet again. So it's just, I don't know. We love the Time Lord time in Boston, but his time in Portland seems to be, waning really, really quickly as well too, because he just can't stay healthy.
Yeah. No, I get it. It was just playfully being suggested.
Hey, Zion spent some time rehabbing in Portland in the last while, or was one of his injuries, and maybe Robert
one of his many injuries.
Bring up the point.
And listen, it appears that he's much higher on the list, right? Like the Pelicans are very much further ahead, you know what I'm saying, than where we might even think the Portland Trailblazers. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and our special guest Grant Afseth covers the Dallas Mavericks. DallasHoopsJournal.com. So be sure to check him out as we give you our Western Conference preview. So let's transition now to the teams that we have set up to be our play-in teams. Okay. LA Clippers, Houston Rockets, Sacramento Kings. Now, this is interesting because the Sacramento Kings a few seasons ago were arguably the baby Warriors that were supposed to now, this was their time, the opportunity, and the Warriors, best days ahead. They essentially should have basically killed off the Warrior dynasty. They failed to do so. The Warriors live, for another season, and probably will live again another season after that, because the Warriors figured out a way to move on from the Kings yet again, right? So here we are. Now, are we talking about, of those teams, the Houston Rockets is the team to look out for? Are the LA Clippers taking a step back? Or given the offseason transitions that have taken place, we have to say this is where they kind of are, but we still should not take for granted what they could potentially be, because as equally as we're saying, the Rockets can be a threat dangerously on an upside. Any Tyronn Lue coach team, especially in the playoffs, will not go out with go quietly in the night, so to speak. I'll now hand it back to you, Grant, and give us your perspective on why we might think that these are the best outcomes teams as far as being playing goes.
Yeah, I think the Clippers are definitely just the hardest team for me personally to really figure out. Like, we don't have a crystal ball, so we don't know how healthy Kawhi is going to be for the whole 82 games. He played a lot of games last year. I think like around 70 or so. And then, the wheels kind of fell off in the playoffs, and he, was sidelined for the rest of the, the series after actually missing game one and then jumping into the series a little bit after. So it's always a wild card with him. Losing Paul George is a big loss in my opinion as well. And then, James Harden, I think will be more aggressive, ramp up what he has done in recent years. But then again, he's also around that 34, 35 age. So when you're ramping back up to previous levels, durability to me kind of seems like a little bit of a concern, but I think they have a lot of talent on their roster. I like Zubats as a center, good rim protector. I think they can put a little bit more on his plate offensively too. Like he's a little more capable in the post than I think, some people may give him credit for. So I think they have the talent. These other teams, I'm actively regretting a little bit, like putting the Kings below them because, I think with them adding DeMar DeRozan, I think they're going to be a very talented offensive team yet again, obviously, but defensively is usually where I have the concerns with them. I think there's a ceiling you have with Sabonis as your 5, with their what they can put out there, the coverages they can use, all that stuff. So that's kind of where I had a little bit of pause with them. And I just think it'd be such a far fall for the Clippers while still having, some talent. Obviously just losing Paul George and still replacing him with like a Derrick Jones. I think he's a good player, someone that I covered last year, in Dallas as well. I think there's just a lot of volatility based off like the feel you have for some of these teams where I think, the best case scenario for like a team like Houston, I think you guys have them higher on your list. I could see the best case scenario being like a play-in team exceeding expectations. They almost did it last year where they fell just a little bit short at that really hot like month of March. I think if they get consistency out of Jalen Green for like the whole season, that really changes like I guess you could say the way you look at them, their outlook and everything. Şengün is a great player already. All those young guys you would think would get better over time as well too. So I definitely could see them, making me look stupid for having them so low on my list at some point. So definitely just a lot to really consider with that bracket.
I was wondering if whether or not this is just Dallas bias saying we'll give you a little bit of respect. We ain't what I'm saying, we're not handing you the whole dinner now. You gotta.
They're just so many good teams. It's crazy to like really like think like, wow, I have the Rockets like at this spot or the Kings.
Wasn't only a couple of years ago like everybody is just completely overlooking the Rockets. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the moment now that we're beyond the Harden era was this, moment where we just said, okay, moving on, the Rockets, are they even still a legitimate team in the NBA? Like, do they, does the city actually have a team in the NBA, the Houston Rockets? And, again, obviously the hiring of Udoka, I think was immense. But I think getting some guys that really buy into the Udoka culture, I think speaks more to how quickly they could probably elevate themselves and, challenge in an already competitive Southeast division that they're currently in, Shaw.
Yeah, I think Grant's word volatility speaks highly for the entirety of the conference. Again, similar to the East, these might be 3-4 game differences, in terms of the standings in general. While Grant ranked them 13th, I had them 11th. Cal had them 8th, this Rockets team, which is possible. But the Rockets, they have so many guys. I think they have too many guys. I just don't know how all those minutes are going to suss themselves out. Obviously, Reed Shepherd I think he's second right now in terms of potential rookie of the year bettings. If you're a bettor out there, Amen Thompson has to play. So, but at the expense of who? So does that Dylan Brooks? Does Dylan Brooks go to the bench? What about Cam Whitmore, who's just electric off the bench? Especially, primarily offensively. To me, the Rockets are the hardest one to figure out because of so many players and all the layers that each one of those players bring, to the proverbial table. Sacramento, with the addition of DeRozan, at least from especially what I've seen in the preseason, seems like it's going to be a pretty seamless fit. I didn't realize, or maybe I just wasn't giving him the credit that he's due in terms of he can be a plug and play guy, at least offensively. He's going to continue to do what he does. Not going to really hurt you, give you a little bit of secondary play creation. He's going to knock down that mid-range on a regular basis without fail. And for the most part, he's going to play, a good amount of games. I like the Kings' capabilities, but they have not done enough, I think, to improve defensively. So slotting them here makes some sense to me in a lot of respects as well. But then lastly, I think we're all just tired. There's a thing of attrition, I think, with the Clippers and being fooled once and twice and so forth and so forth. So at this point, like, listen, I'm not going to put them as a top 4 team. Here feels good. It's safe, playing range. And if it works out differently, awesome. But at this stage, who's betting the farm on the Clippers' ability to stay healthy? Are you betting now? Yes, James Harden looks great in preseason. He's going to have a much larger load to kind of to manage on a regular basis. But do you want Terrence Mann having to do more on a regular basis? I like Terrence Mann, but in the role that he was in, but now is he going to be miscast and trying to have to do more in that space? I don't know. I haven't seen Norman Powell this preseason, so I don't know what he's looking like. But again, good offensive guy. Derek Jones Jr. still can contribute. Zubac, I think, is primed to be better at that center spot too. But it just frustrates me. The Clippers thing just frustrates me. So leaving them here, fine. If they do better, hey, then we'll all eat a little bit of crow. But I'm not ready to go that route right now. I'm not betting on the beard at all.
Well, it sounds like your appetite for crow is, hey, I'm okay with it. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like if you go to France and you have escargot, like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm willing to, you know what I'm saying, try different things, right? Because I can't keep trying the same thing here. I respect that, Shaw. I truly do. I wanted to come back to something that you were talking about a moment ago as it pertains to the Houston Rockets. Sometimes, having too much of the same thing might actually be a good thing for a guy like Udoka. Because if you really think about where, and I don't want to try and stay on everything about Eastern Conference, but we can tie with what Udoka did for the Boston Celtics prior to his exodus and what laid the foundation for what we now see as to why we talk about the Boston Celtics being the best team in the NBA. He established those role players in such a way that I think it made it easier for Mazzulla to figure out how he can plug and play with the style of system that he wants. And I think that, to me, the only way you're able to do that is if you have the type of players who can, you have that kind of versatility too. Sometimes there's some players that are just so one-dimensional that you can't do anything with them, and you got to pray that your general manager figures out some way to finagle some kind of move to bring the kind of player that you want, because you just can't spend enough time developing guys to be the where. Now, I'm not saying that all of these role players that you were talking about are like that, but what I'm saying is if there's probably one of the head coaches that we're talking about in this Western Conference that might be capable of getting the most out of these guys in the minutes and commanding them and staying and keeping them on it through the course of a regular season, it's probably Udoka. Whereas other guys are going to lean into what's gotten them success and are not going to move or budge from it moving forward. So that was the only thing that I wanted to say as it pertains to the Rockets, which is why I'm probably a lot higher on him, because he's shown me that he's been able to make freaking beef bouillon with liver. Okay. Like, we don't know what these guys are going to potentially look like if you send them on somewhere else, but maybe with this team, you might actually see where it actually makes sense. So that was my perspective. As it pertains to the other two teams, with the Clippers and with the Kings, I am completely on board with both what you and Grant are talking about, because to me, the Kings should already be there. However, their defensive Achilles, the Achilles in their defensive abilities, I think will continue to hamper them unless Brown channels something in him of back in his yesteryears when he was supposed to be a defensive guru specialist type person, that he gets these guys to actually execute and play better defense against the better teams. Not so much the fact that they can't play decent defense, but they're so offensively minded that even if they're a top 5 team scoring wise, against the better teams that know how to counter them and play them up defensively, they don't know how to win low scoring games. So they got to score like 125 or more for them to be a legitimate basketball team.
All right. Well, I'm going to just close the point here on Houston. I know getting Reed Shepherd is helpful in a lot of ways, but especially for Fred VanVleet. He was playing too many minutes. So when you talk about you have too many guys, not at that position, especially, again, secondary play creation. So he'll be able to kind of come in there. But Jabari Smith Jr., he's a young bull, as I say. I'm sure he wants to be able to prove himself some. Not necessarily Steve Adams we know he's going to kind of come in there and play a role. So that's not going to be an issue. But Jalen Green, he has a contract situation kind of looming out here. Şengün has a contract situation kind of looming out here as well too. So that's where I agree in terms of Udoka being a disciplinarian, but having to have them truly buy into the team concept and not worrying about what are their personal accolades. And remember, Jabari Smith came in here pissed off already because he wasn't the number one pick. So there's a lot of things I think that he has to manage, and the talent level is there, and they could be in line for a consolidation trade, but I don't even know what that would look like, and how would you not upset whatever the chemistry is there, if you move some of those guys out.
Better to manage it in Houston than manage it in Boston.
Well, less expectations. I get that. No doubt.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing hot button topics of the NBA with our special guest, Grant Afseth of Dallas Hoops Journal. All right, man. Let's get right into it.
Oh, chunky time.
Stuff. Yeah, man. I got my soup warming up in the oven as we speak. All right. Middle of the pack teams. We've got the Memphis Grizzlies, New Orleans Pelicans, Golden State Warriors, LA Lakers, Minnesota Timberwolves. Shaw, I'm going to basically allow you to, how do I say, bring to light the picture of how we came to, or we derived as being the middle of the pack.
Well, volatility is how we got here to be 1,000% honest.
I woke up and chose volatility. Yes.
So again, for those playing at home, Cal messed up our rankings here. That is my brother, but he has some irrational faith, I'd say, in this Los Angeles Lakers team, and his ranking catapulted them, into this space to be in the middle of the pack. Whereas Grant and I took a more realistic approach to what the Lakers have been doing the last couple seasons.
Yes, I woke up and chose chaos. That's it. I got up that morning and I said, I will bring chaos to this ranking. Yes.
Well, thank you for that, because it makes for great podcast content. So as such, I think it's only fair that Grant, yes, you are a guest, but I need my fellow co-host to explain himself here, why he has the Lakers as the 5th seed in the Western Conference. JJ Redick and Dalton Knecht must really have you in some sort of a tizzy.
All right, Lakers fans, this is your mulligan, because you will never hear me try to give this much praise for your organization. Matter of fact, our boy Jabari right now, I'm expecting my Christmas gift a little bit earlier than December 25th, my friend. Okay, so let me speak to this, because the reason why I have the Los Angeles Lakers as elevated as it is, it's not because I'm expecting the Los Angeles Lakers to do resounding things. I think where I'm coming from is, I think the gap between teams that are 5 all the way down to the play-in will be so tightly knit that it may come down to a couple of games in which, unfortunately, I will still rest my faith in LeBron James and Anthony Davis among these teams as far as the type of duo that is capable of winning the necessary games to position themselves best so that they can continue to compete. Again, I repeat, it is not me saying that JJ Redick is going to be this, once in a lifetime, magical head coach, and he's going to innovate something awesome and great about, it's got nothing to do with that. It's really about how tightly packed the Western Conference is going to play out come towards the end of the season. And if it's that way, and the way I'm predicting it, I just see where the Lakers, to me, of the teams that we're talking about, have proven more so to be as competitive when it matters the most, and have the best capable players that are going to be suited to win the necessary games to position themselves to be so highly ranked in the middle of the pack. Excuse me. All right, feel free now to slander me crazy. Yes.
Let's keep with the wrestling monikers here. Do you smell what Cal is cooking here with the LA Lakers?
Yeah, I think I understand to an extent. Like, if you think it's going to be a really tight race, and you just think like LeBron, AD, whatever else about that Lakers team that you like will help them rise at the top.
And look, they'll get back Vanderbilt, right? So I just think that as a team, competitively, they may be the more well-together put team that will win out necessary games, only under the premise that this is going to be a very contested run of middle-of-pack teams trying to position themselves, and whether it be to play in or get as far as to the 5 seed. That, to me, is how close I'm thinking this is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I think my only thing with the Lakers is just health. I think if you think that's going to work out in their favor to where they're in that mix and they can, outpace other teams just enough to, be in that next bracket below the top four, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I just feel like I've seen, a lot of injury reports with like Jared Vanderbilt missing time and, just some of their role players and stuff. But, sometimes that's just random occurrences. So we can't predict the future for sure. So we'll definitely kind of like the Clippers. We'll have to see how the health department, how many hospital visits there are with that team.
Grant, you're
But
being way
definitely
too
like what they have.
diplomatic. Grant, you're being way too diplomatic, man. Feel free to call Cap on Cal. Call Cap on Cal if you absolutely have to, because my man Shaw ain't afraid to. I'm just saying, it's not about my affinity and love of the Lakers. It's how sick and tired I am of underestimating this damn team when they really should have been like this already 2 seasons ago.
Yeah, I think I guess part of this whole thing is just that, like, we're going to get into it later, but some of the teams that were higher on than the Lakers, like, I just think, like, honestly, like, I guess it's a big part of it is how do you think Minnesota will be impacted by, I guess you could say, like, moving on from Cat? How do you think Phoenix will be after a full training camp, with point guards that are actual point guards that let them get into their offense let them do what they do best? Memphis is probably a team as well in this whole mix where, my calculus with them, I have them 6 for transparency on my rankings, just because I know they've won a lot of games in the past, like 250-win seasons, assuming also there's no off the court or injury, like long stretches that impact them negatively. I just think they've had a lot of success in this current little era that they have with their core when, Jaren Jackson's been paired up with like a big center that can really like do the dirty work inside. And I personally think Zach Edey can do that. Maybe not as established and consistently as some of their other guys in the past, like Steven Adams or Valanciunas or any of those guys like that. But I do think that is a formula that I've seen in the past that could work well. And then, not to go through the whole, Western Conference here, but, like the Pelicans are another wild
They're all
card.
in the middle of the pack.
Yeah. Like that's where I could definitely see where the Lakers have an identity. They've seen some of that work out, like with their run of the Western Conference Finals. They still have some of those role players if health goes their way. And, I could definitely see where, that volatility word again, where that goes in their favor. But yeah, just a lot of just question marks, I think, with injuries as well. Because even with New Orleans and even Golden State, like their best players tend to miss a good amount of games as well too. Like Steph tends to have like a lengthy stretch each season where you're like, wow, like this team's kind of rough trying to stay afloat here. Same with New Orleans and Zion. If I think there's only been really 1 year in his career where he's really like stayed healthy for like most of the entire season. So definitely a lot of question marks, but I can definitely see why you are, high on the Lakers.
And look, I'm down on the New Orleans Pelicans. I think you guys are a little bit higher on them, or significantly higher on them and stuff like that. And Shaw, I'm opening up the floor to you because I know you laid it on me to lay out the argument about the Los Angeles Lakers. My concern, and Shaw, I want you to weigh in, and then Grant, you can certainly follow up on this, is the reason why the reason why I am down on the Memphis Grizzlies in my rankings. It's not that I don't think that they are capable. I just don't think that the makeup of the team in those 50-year iterations are the same team. And this is so difficult for me to see a team that basically won like 30-something games, to suddenly catapult themselves somewhere in like a 20-win turnaround with a guy who's arguably in the MVP conversation a year removed from not playing basketball. To me, that just gives me reason for concern when you're looking at the other teams that have established what the hierarchy is and what the criteria should be met to be MVP ready. You're asking for an MVP season for John Morant coming back with the type of team that he doesn't have access to. I'm concerned about that, which is probably why I put him down as low as I did, but not to say that they're like 10 games away from anyone else that they could have leapfrogged. I'm just saying that I just don't buy into this team just yet. I'd have to see what it looks like with John Morant and Zach Edey and Jaren Jackson. You know what? if Jaren Jackson showed me he was the kind of guy that can carry this team without Ja Morant, I probably would buy into this idea and have them further up the list. But you know, and I know, Shaw, because we've had him on our show, had our conversations numerous times. He used to be I don't want to say he used to be your young son. You wanted him to be your young son, but now he was kind of like in the orphanage to the side. He kind of kept looking at him side eye, be like, you know what I'm saying? This is
I need
how
my dog to rebound. I need my dog to rebound. Point blank, period.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that. But to counter your point with Memphis, and again, for full disclosure, so we ended up, Grant and I, we didn't work in consortium, just how it bid, but we both had Memphis 6 and I think New Orleans 7, so 6 and 7 respectively. Where Cal again had Memphis 13, which again kind of changed the calculus on this as well. My thing though with Memphis is, despite being injury riddled, playing like 35 guys last year or something absurd, they still managed to have a decent defense. And I think that is something that they're going to be able to hang their hat on, especially once they get their guys back. You can't account for Jackson missing time, Bane missing time, Smart missing time, Ja missing time. Like, that's just not something. And I know they're going into the season a little bit banged up with some role players, J.J. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., but those are the ancillary guys. If the main guys are there, especially with the addition of Edey, I think this team can get right back into the 45, 48 win range. Maybe not the 51 that they had, a couple seasons ago. But because they play defense and because they're talented, and, if Desmond Bane is, the truth like he's supposed to be.
Addressed shooting, though. They got some, but they're shooting something left to be desired.
I mean, but you can say that for a similar team, like when we talk about the Eastern Conference in terms of like Orlando. Like, did they get enough shooting? Is KCP like the magical elixir? I don't know that that's really the case, but everybody's high on Orlando. So I think, I don't know if Taylor Jenkins is getting enough credit as a head coach, I think, in this situation. And that's why I feel like Memphis is going to have a bounce back season of sorts. But, as we were joking before we got on air, Ja Morant's already irritated because I think in the GM survey, he was rated as one of the guys who's going to have a breakout season. He's like, how the F didn't I already break out? You know what I mean? So, people are counting Grizzlies out in a way that I think in some arenas that doesn't really quite make sense to me. As I move over to the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm very confused about what's going on in this front court. So is Zion going to really be like the small ball 5 on a regular basis? Again, not to bring up Celtics lore, but Daniel Tice, Celtics legend. Is he really somebody who you want to be kind of manning the middle on a regular basis there? And what's going on with Brandon Ingram? He seems like he's going to be chill and play the role, but he's not happy about his contract situation. So what goes on there? And CJ McCollum, is he a bench guy now? Is he going to start now? I think the preseason he has been starting. I don't know if that's the long-term path here, but they need to make sure. I think it's Trey Murphy who's hurt. He needs to be able to be back. They got Herb Jones on the wing as well, too, who can give them a lot of versatility defensively. The Pelicans are an intriguing team to me. And because, how do I say this? It's almost the exact opposite of the Clippers. Like, because we've seen the Pelicans be the best team in the league for like 7-game stretches for the last 2 years. And you feel like they look like world beaters and then they kind of regress or somebody gets hurt or whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like splitting the baby here. It's like, all right, well, we'll put them in the middle. That seems safe, because if they're the best versions of themselves and the worst versions of themselves, that should be somewhere in the middle of this. And that's where I land on the Memphis Grizzlies. We haven't even talked about Minnesota yet, and I'm not even going to address the Lakers. So I'm going to flip it back over to you, Grant. Let's talk a little bit about the Timberwolves. Cat gone, Julius Randle coming into the space. So we've talked a lot about in the show about secondary play creation too. Randle does bring that, but doesn't give the same spacing that Cat does. But they get DiVincenzo to come off the bench. One of the concerns I had was, does DiVincenzo now stunt what could have been a very productive rookie year for Rob Dillingham? Maybe they don't need to be worried about that. But your thoughts on Minnesota's outlook now post-trade?
Yeah, I think they're definitely a clunkier offense. I think a lot of what they were able to run last year relied on the shooting ability that Cat brings. I think they still have, that relatively with Naz Reid off the bench. But if you're starting, Julius Randle, I don't think you can really do as much like with their horns flare stuff and all that type of like double drag screening actions. I think it's just a lot less effective when you're replacing Cat with Julius Randle. I think you could still kind of get into more stagnant stuff out of that, where he's making a play after potential switch or something. But I just think with the way they were able to really pull centers out of the paint, make them really think, and open things up to make it simplified for Rudy, in the paint, that kind of made the most out of what they could. And I think it's just going to get a little clunkier offensively because they also don't have that much for, I think, shot creation and just general support around Anthony Edwards in terms of like established production. Like I think there's also some limitations. I think like the size for Dante DiVincenzo, like sometimes it really stands out when he's trying to make a play and he's drawing two defenders. And I think he's going to draw like relatively often with the offensive players that they have. And I think Anthony Edwards is going to have to really like transcend what they have around him in that regard, where he's just going to have to be like taking even step higher with his like ability to knock down off the dribble shots on the pull ups. He's going to have to really attack the rim with a plan and be efficient. And I think which is was going to be the case regardless. I just don't think it fits as well anymore. And I think defensively they were great last year. I think the blueprint's there to where they can really kind of cover up whatever you think you need to cover up with Julius Randle. But offensively, they were already kind of underwhelming. I think they were like 17th in offensive rating, and I think they're going to have a tougher time operating. And that's just for a team that already need to get better in that regard. It just felt like a financial trade more than a basketball trade, in my opinion. So I think
let me interrupt real quick on that. So just, before we transition, we got to talk a little bit Warriors too, before we get out of this tier, this very, very chunky tier. Do you think Randall stays in Minnesota? Because that exact same situation, it was a lot of the finances. They feel like, maybe we can be somewhat in the same ballpark talent wise, but he does have, this is his contract year. So do you think he ends up staying in Minnesota, or do they have to move him, if things aren't going well?
I think it'll definitely make a lot of sense to try to trade him. It's just a matter of like what interest they'll get around the league. Because sometimes, like as you guys all know, when you want to trade someone, but no one really wants to make that other side of the deal in a way that fits for you. Not saying no one will want Julius Randle, but I'm saying like, what are you getting back midseason that is so like, I guess you could say like, you know what, I think that would fill out the holes that we have on our roster. The money works, the assets work. Let's agree to this trade. I think there's a lot of restrictions I feel like that they might run into with that. But I definitely think ideally, if you were to kind of simulate their season, I do think probably moving on at some point would make the most sense. Just because I think their ideal play style with Rudy, like just for all the things I was mentioning, I think it's just it's a little clunky. And I think when it gets clunky for a guy like Rudy, it's a little challenging to get enough output offensively. Because I think even in Utah, when he was at his best, it was that like super spread out, like high pick and roll. And, they really simplified it for him. I think he's someone that kind of struggles when he has to, post up himself or, shot fake and, get a defender to fly by him and finish in the paint. Like, I think that's just stuff that he's got to do more that he's not necessarily effective at. And I think that, more so playoffs is a concern, but I think regular season there'll be some limitations more that they'll have offensively than they had before, and they already needed to be steps above what they were last year.
Damn it, man! I feel like we can speak for another 15, 20 minutes to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves and what this move impact would have, not just specifically for the team itself, but also the landscape about what might happen come the offseason, depending upon what happens with this Minnesota Timberwolves team. But we'll have Grant, put that in your back pocket because we will be bringing you on for that soon enough. All right, Shaw mentioned it. We need to talk about the Golden State Warriors. I find it interesting, Shaw, that you felt like Golden State Warriors, LA Lakers, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Timberwolves, safe place. Let's put them somewhere in the middle of the pack. Why would we want the Warriors be quote unquote in that safe space as well too? Why is it that we cannot kill the Warriors? Like why is it that vibe cannot be killed? Is it because it's Steph Curry? Is it because they really do still have some talented players that it keeps them in the realm of that conversation, given the landscape of what we've been talking about with the rest of these other middle of the pack teams?
Yeah, you answered it. It's Steph Curry. As again, I think Warriors loyalists will say, as long as we have Steph, we have a chance. And I think that holds true, at least a chance to be in the play-in, even in the middle of the pack. And I think full transparency, the Warriors rank roughly about 8th, when we take our aggregate thing here. It makes a lot of sense, for where they're at. While I will sing Steph's praises until the cows come home, I don't, and excuse me, people will call me a casual, I'm sure. I don't see what people see in Jonathan Kuminga. He's cool and all, but I just don't get it. Everyone wants this leap from him, but it's just, for me, he just seems like a rotation guy who can score it a little bit, but I don't see all of the tools. Then there's the aspect of Andrew.
I have an opinion about that part of it, Shaw. But again, it would open up Pandora's box in the conversation and stuff like that. Let me just say this: Steve Kerr. This to me is an interesting dynamic, because we've been speaking about this for quite some time on his inability to really help coach up the talent. And when he does coach up the talent, he doesn't use the talent nearly as much as he relies on his core, what used to be his core four. So that's the reason why I'm going to speak to this thing about the Jonathan Kuminga thing. I think we all wanted to see it all happen. I just don't think that the type of offense and the way that this team has been built around Steph Curry, which is not Steph Curry's fault, but the way that this team has been built around, it marginalizes what we're hoping that we're going to see from the Posminskis, from the Kumingas, from the Moody's. I mean, list off the number of guys who have been cool, nice key role players who have moments, but now suddenly, you know what I'm saying, we can't speak about them because they've only get a half a season of where they're actually flourishing, and then they just fall off into the abyss of unknowingness as a Warrior player. That irks me, but I've always spoken about that as far as my biggest pet peeve with Steve Kerr.
Well, they seem to be hell bent on not trading Podziemski on anything unless they're getting a superstar back. So the fact that he was the linchpin holding up a marketing deal was somewhat surprising to me. I mean, depending on what you believe out there in terms of the rumors, but they seem to be high on him, which means, hey, he'll probably play, plus minutes going into this. The addition of Buddy Hield was cool. You get, a Walmart version, I guess, of Clay, but I mean, he is one of the league leaders in threes. So I'm not trying to diminish that in any capacity, but he doesn't bring anything on the defensive side whatsoever. I think it's Delon Wright. No, is that right? Who they got? To help out kind of in the backcourt as well too. And those are all solid moves, but it all kind of linchpins on what kind of player is Draymond Green still at this stage. And is Andrew Wiggins focused enough and doesn't have, all the things happening in his personal life where he can contribute on a regular basis? I sound really down on them. I'm not. It's just I'm concerned, but I just feel like because Steph's gravity on a regular night-to-night basis is just so massive, it kind of they win despite themselves and despite whatever you might want to say about Steve Kerr at times. But I'll kick it to you, Grant. Just your thoughts on some of those key guys, and am I just off base? What am I missing here on the Jonathan Kuminga train that everybody else is on?
Yeah, I think for the most part, they definitely are. I guess you could say they leave that feel of an incomplete team where they have the great player at the top. Draymond Green, when he's at the top of his game, is like a game-changing defender with his versatility. There's a lot to like with that, but there are just a lot of questions they have. Like when you hear in training camp, who is our starting center? Should we play Draymond at the 5? That's kind of awkward. And then you're already like, wait, don't you also have perimeter concerns too? Who's going to start on the wing? It's kind of awkward there. And they always seem to have this thing where it's like they can't quite. I think I know what you're talking about with Kuminga, because I think every single time it gets to talking about lineups, there's always this thing of well, Kuminga's a 4, but Draymond's a 4. But he can play the 5, but we want a 5 out there for our defense. So it's they just have this weird identity of they don't have this base thing that just fits really cleanly and works. It's always a work in progress. Tonight, we can get away with Kuminga and Draymond in the center. Well, the next night we can't really do that. So we're going to go small with Dre at the 5. And then all of a sudden that really opens up Kuminga offensively because, last year, they even did some creative stuff where Clay was screening for him or ghost screening, and that opened up a straight line drive to go hard right and just play through contact. And he's got the physical talent to do that. But, I think they also haven't really leaned into diversifying and trusting the offense enough to where it's all right, well, screw it. Let's just see what Kuminga could do in high pick and roll. Can he make the reads we need him to make? And what does he look like if we do it for stretches where we can then kind of attack from different points, have Steph, be stationed in different situations, take some pressure off him. But instead it's more within the flow and they're having like a perimeter player go screen and stuff like that. And sometimes they'll have like the Trace Jackson Davis's and Looney's screen as well. But I just think there hasn't been this like clean identity where his skill set is fully like proven and trusted, and it fits within the like just core of what they want to do. It just seems like they're always going to have these questions until they really like figure it out one way and then live with the consequences one way or another. Because if they do think it's not the clean fit, and like, okay, can you really go forward with Dre and Kuminga? If not, what are you doing? Like, what move can you make? And that's where it gets into the whole point of, well, in the summer, you were linked to Paul George, but reportedly weren't willing to move some of those pieces like a Kuminga to make that deal happen. So then, like, how invested are you in this current timeline? It gets into this, like the weeds. Was Paul George just too expensive at that proportion with him wanting the max and everything? I know he was willing to take a little less for the Warriors based off the reporting that I read, but just overall, it's like a lot of just constant questions where it just seems like they're always putting out fires instead of just like having this great identity.
Grant, you know what is interesting to what you just said? I just thought about this, maybe, and it's something that is being factored into as well. This has always also been a problem with me about the Golden State Warriors is the identity of Steph Curry. Do you want Steph Curry to be the primary ball scorer, or do you want Steph Curry to be the primary floor general? And at times when you ask him to be the primary floor general, it's with the intent that he is involving everyone and getting everyone set up and putting everyone in the best position possible to make things offensively easier for Steph Curry. And I feel like part of the struggle is what version of Steph do you want to encompass or encapsulate the identity of the offensive system that Steve Kerr is still trying to run? Because you're not running that same kind of system with the guys that you've had previously on your championship runs. Wiggins is not the same. You don't have Klay Thompson. Dre doesn't shoot the ball as much, if not at all, anymore. So you have all of these other ancillary players that you're trying to bring up. And if the intent is that they can't go out and get buckets on their own, are you asking Steph to get them in a position to get buckets for you? Are you asking Steph to be Steph Curry, who has been doing what he does, which is being, on a nightly night out basis, absolutely the most remarkable scoring player that the game has ever seen? And I just feel like that is also one of the struggles that they have, which is why they're hesitant to pull the trigger on some of the deals, because you would probably think that Steph can make something happen and work far better with Lauri Markkanen than he's been trying to do with the Jonathan Kuminga, to Shaw's point, if we don't think that Kuminga is that guy.
Yeah, well, and I don't think he's that guy. I mean, they got to work in Kyle Anderson now as well too, for whatever that's worth. And it was Melton, not right. I get them confused for some reason. Yeah, but Melton is on this roster as well too. And one thing happened with them last year, and obviously we'll move on here from this. But the Warriors, to Grant's point, they had various iterations because of injuries, right? But especially last year, I think they played a lineup for like 7 games. All right, that worked. Oh, that's not working anymore. All right, well, let's do this now. And it was like little chunks where they kept trying to tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. And again, yes, some of that is injury ridden, but it's because they don't have the ultimate confidence in the roster or the runway to let some of the younger guys just go out here and continue to make mistakes, because they do have to appease Curry, in the timeline that he's in Curry right now, because there's just not whole lot of time for him left in that. So if Moses Moody and Kuminga and Podziemski and those guys aren't ready to rock, Trace Jackson Davis, those minutes are going to get toyed with on a regular basis. But I still feel like Golden State can put enough points on the board on a regular basis. We saw, they just put up like 33s or something like that, or maybe something ridiculous in the preseason, so if that's the way that they're going to go, air quote, copycat style, in the NBA, and they can have that level of efficiency on, not necessarily on a regular basis, but pseudo regular, then yeah, they're going to be right there, and they're going to be a problem for a lot of teams out there. All right, Cal, let's move on, to the contenders in the West.
Let's move on to the contenders. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast with our special guest, Grant Afseth of Dallas Hoops Journal. All right. We don't have a drum roll.
After Effects.
Yeah, After Effects. All right. So for our contenders, right, these are obviously the teams that we amply believe will be, in the thick of it, and ultimately are, going to be, the teams to beat, in the Western Conference. And so That's what we have listed for our contenders: the Phoenix Suns, Dallas Mavericks, Oklahoma City Thunder, Denver Nuggets. Grant, I know you'd feel some kind of way if somehow we had the Dallas Mavericks on the outskirts of such things. So you're good. No, but all seriousness, obviously our selections is, clearly what the Dallas Mavericks have shown us, what the Oklahoma City Thunder have shown us, the Denver Nuggets have shown us, and what I guess we're potentially believing or buying into as to what the Phoenix Suns should give us, right? How much of that do we think that it's the Phoenix Suns should be that team more so than it was the Minnesota Timberwolves from last year, or how much of it is about the Minnesota Timberwolves and the trade that they made that's pushing them a step back, that we have to say, well, of all the other teams that we have to go with, let's just go with the Phoenix Suns? How much of it is Phoenix Suns talent, or how much of it is Minnesota Timberwolves taking a step back?
I think it's probably both, honestly, because I think it's just going to be tough offensively unless Ant plays at just brilliant half court offensive, like highly efficient, consistently great basketball in the playoff setting. I think it's going to be tough for them to generate enough. And Phoenix, I think they already, to their credit, won 49 games with all of the stuff that they had, like the roster holes, trying to navigate that first year of the second apron. So I think, we're getting two efficient point guards, that are steady handed. You can trust them. I think that enhances what they have. I'm not necessarily like a big fan of anything that they have at the center position right now. I think a rim protector that could, finish on the roll better would be a cleaner fit for them. So I'm not really sure what they can do with Nurkic. Like, I don't know if, there's maybe a midseason opportunity there for them on the trade block or anything of that nature. They're just so restricted by what they can do, where I feel like I see the vision of what they want to do. I think they have the talent to be, an effective team, but I just don't I think they're still missing that, that impact at the five to really tie it all together. In Minnesota, I just think offensively, I just need to see how they're going to utilize Julius Randle. I know they're kind of got that belief of his relationship with Chris Finch from their time on the New Orleans Pelicans. I just need to see a little more of how that's going to look, and how everyone else around him responds to it too. Because I see the best case scenario. I understand it, where he's a more like aggressive scorer. He can maybe get you those like ugly buckets in the playoffs, that maybe Karl Towns struggled to do, especially against the Mavericks. Like, I always was looking at that matchup entering that series as like, okay, so PJ Washington, how is he going to hold his own against a guy like Cat? Like 6'7" PJ Washington should probably be getting scored on, relatively often, for a star big man with the skill that Karl Towns has. Well, he held his own for much of that series, and there were some just underwhelming performances in bad times from Cat that really, I think, plagued them in the Western Conference Finals. So I think, like, if you had Julius Randle in there, maybe those like, put your head down, make a play, like not necessarily as you drew it up sort of scoring opportunities could be what they needed. Yeah. So I think like that's not really like an identity that you want to like rely on a nightly basis though.
So Grant, you have a lot more confidence going into this season. And obviously because you've been watching this Dallas Mavericks team so far, you have a lot more confidence about this Dallas Mavericks team being even better defensively. I know that the knock was about how the Dallas Mavericks were not a good team defensively until they made those moves. And then they were arguably like a top 3, top 5 team defensively the second half of the year on their way to the NBA Finals. So you have even more confidence with the way things are that the Dallas Mavericks defensively can even be better than what they showed us the second half of this year. And with basically a full season of PJ Washington under, the kid flagship, so to speak, as to how he can help command everything defensively for them to be formidable now, not just offensively, but also defensively.
Yeah, I definitely think, when you also part of like, I definitely have like that, that natural bias because I watch them and I know a lot more about them than all these other teams. I just think, at the start of last year, rim protection is such a big part of what any defense does. I think, especially in the regular season, Derek Lively was getting his first exposure to the NBA. He looked like he was overpowered by Minnesota's, Rudy and Cat duo in Abu Dhabi. during the global games before the regular season started. And, he responded very well in the second game. I thought he looked much better. And then, he throughout the whole season, I felt like he, saw a matchup second time for the most part. He would handle it much better. And, he's a fast learner, all that stuff. Enough about Derek Lively. But just like, now he's going to be second season. They're able to diversify their schemes a lot more. They didn't necessarily want to put too much on his plate early last year, so they waited till later in the year to mix in more switching, more veer switching, all that stuff. That worked quite well, especially in the playoffs, until they ran into just such a good team like Boston. They had just such the shooting ability and just the 4 threats on the floor that can attack off the dribble at all times that really like stress them. But I think just adding in another guy with a similar skill set for the whole year, like Daniel Gafford behind him, that provides a higher floor in my opinion. Because if there is an injury for Derek Lively, they're not relying on Dwight Powell or whatever, like Maxi Kleba to play so heavily at the 5. But they still have those options with Kleba to switch everything. But I think really where like defensively I'm intrigued. I just get a sense that like sometimes with these big moves that happen, you don't really know like the mentality of the player involved, like a Klay Thompson. But I, just from, being around him and just hearing his comments and, I'm still learning more about him. But I really do think he has a lot of motivation to, win with this team, but most particularly prove himself defensively again. Like he even talked about that. He said, I know a lot of people talked about my defense, but I, really feel like I am still that high level defender and I'm, motivated to prove it. And I know words, that like anyone can say anything, but I do think he's going to compete defensively. Whether the impact is necessarily as great as you would like remains to be seen. But I think the motivation from that, the buy-in from that type of player definitely is part of the question that I would have when I'm evaluating them for their outlook. But I think that, gives me more confidence since they have, a formula already, like with, Washington and, Lively at the 4 and the 5. So I think they're going to be able to do more switching this year, which should help Klay, within the flow of possessions, should help Luka and Kyrie. But I think we also saw like during the playoffs, it was definitely up and down with Luka. He was dealing with some injuries as well in the finals where I think just the wheels fell off defensively for him. Like I think that was just a lot of playoff basketball where he's taking epidurals or whatever you want to say for his chest and all this stuff. But I thought Kyrie geared up to guard some top matchups quite well. It's different in the regular season, of course, but I thought, he handled like James Harden well in the Clippers series. And when he needed to step up and guard guys, he was willing to do so. I think adding Klay, my whole point kind of tying it all together, allows them to diversify offensively enough to where maybe those top guys can, be a little more durable, have the stamina to guard their position, whether it's like a tough matchup, like a star player that's going to try to break them down or not. But regardless, I think Luka will always be the guy teams bring up in the actions to hunt. They just need to wear him down, like get him a little bit like less efficient throughout the course of a game. So I think that's still going to remain the core of how teams attack them. And I think also on the flip side, the Mavericks are still always going to try to find the weak link shooting wise in the other team, kind of, try to disrespect that shooter, pack the paint, maybe do cross matching a little more since they can trust Lively to switch more and, live with the results with that one. That worked really well throughout the playoffs up until facing a team where, there was nowhere you could hide anymore, if you will, against Boston.
Yeah, I'll jump in only from the aspect where with Dallas too. I like the addition of Najee Marshall. I don't know if he's going to play exactly the Derrick Jones role verbatim per se, but I think, in a kind of bizarro type situation, he'll get some of those minutes and do some of those same things. Klay, just add somebody else who can get hot in an instant, so he knocks down 2 in a row, then like you're like, oh shit, like there's going to be problems. So Dallas is obviously going to be right here at the top of the Western Conference competing. I think Phoenix is a team similarly that we've kind of grandfathered into this tier because of the talent. They still, despite all their woes last year, as I think Grant alluded to, still won 49 games. Get Coach Bud over there now to try to bring some organization in addition to the point guard play. They should be right there. They're the team I have the least amount of respect for actually winning it, but and respect is maybe too strong of a terminology, but I'm at least confident in their ability to do that. But the talent is obviously clearly there for them to be right here in this mix. But what comes down to this now, and I think the preseason is starting to show some concerns for the good old Denver Nuggets. They might have lost too much, and while Jokic is still right there and it's going to be a perennial MVP guy, a lot of this hinges on Jamal Murray's ability to be. I don't think he can be a Western Conference All-Star, and they don't even actually need him to be. They need him to be Jamal Murray all the time, especially when it comes to the playoffs. If he can get back to a certain level of health, Denver is always going to have a chance. But losing KCP and losing Brown and guys like that over the last couple of years seems to have taken a little bit of a chunk out of them. I don't know if Christian Brown and what's his name, Julius. I just don't know if they're ready to step up into this space right now. And so they're giving me a little bit of a pause, despite where I think I ranked them. I did rank them third, in my top tier here. But if they were to fall or to stumble a little bit, I would not be that surprised, because I'm not getting warm and fuzzies about the entirety of their roster, especially when it comes to depth and their ability to compete in this. And we'll see what Russ brings into this equation as well. Finally, for me, OKC, I don't know how either of you don't have the number one, and it's fine. This is what debates are for. They were the number one seed last year. Well, I think Dallas did a lot. I don't know that they've done enough to usurp OKC, especially with the additions of Caruso and Hartenstein. A year 3, Jalen Williams, who is my young son. I love that dude, as do a lot of guys. I just really feel like OKC has it together, and Coach Daganal as well too, as one of the better ones out there. To me, this is their conference in essence, not necessarily to lose, but it's Dallas and them to me. Everybody else, too many questions for me to even give much consideration to. But I was a little surprised that y'all didn't have as much faith. It's not like you had them 12th or 15th, but you didn't have as much faith of them winning the Western Conference as I seem to do.
Because I just wonder whether or not, if we're talking about total wins of the season, I just feel like the Denver Nuggets, and maybe what we'd have to do is crack out the schedule and see, who has the ability to have more sustainability in the wins, and where those wins come from at what particular time frame. I think that teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, as young as they are, they do hit a wall, where they go to a stretch of games playing against the best teams in the Eastern Conference, and they suddenly are the top team in the Western Conference, suddenly become third. And a team like the Denver Nuggets have proven that they just know how to win games. Remember last year, the second half of the season, they were hanging around 4th or 5th. And then catapulted themselves to number 1, and then injuries unfortunately compromised them where they knocked them out of being the number 1 seed. So in a way, the Oklahoma City Thunder lucked themselves into it because they had a favorable schedule that allowed them to win the kind of games they needed to for them to sustain being number 1. But it basically came down to the wire. So I see that no different between the Nuggets, the Mavericks, and the Thunder. I feel it's interchangeable. I think it could swing any way, shape, or form. The only difference is, the reason why it's hard for me to put the Mavericks there is because I think if their schedule puts them in a position where they got to play more of their teams in the Southeast rather than, teams that you're playing in the Northwest, where you've got the Jazz, you got the Timberwolves, and who knows where those two teams will be, it may favor either the Thunder or the Nuggets to get more wins to put them to be the number 1 seed than when the Mavericks, who may have a stretch of games where they're playing against the Pelicans, the Rockets, and all of them may have something to play for, may make it tougher. And if you're, Jason Kidd, who's as savvy a veteran coach as any, if he feel it necessary to rest his players to get them ready for the playoff run, he's not afraid to do it, because he knows that team is capable of going out there and winning on the road. The Mavericks proved that last season. So that's the reason why, I have the Nuggets still, because as the team with the most to prove, I think it's important for them to do that. And part of that is predicated on the kind of play you get from Jokic and the kind of play and the shape that Jamal Murray should be in coming into this season. But I don't disagree with you, Shaw. I know that I would love to put the Oklahoma City Thunder as number 1. I'm just saying that given the circumstance, it's almost tough sledding for me, because I feel like if the Thunder and the Nuggets run into each other, I don't know if I believe yet the Thunder can beat a team like the Nuggets, because they don't have an equal answer for a Jokic the same way that they had that they could have had an answer when they played against the Dallas Mavericks and failed to advance in the playoffs.
I mean, who has an answer for Jokic though? Like really and truly. So I mean, yes, you got Hartenstein there, and Shed. He's obviously he's
I
light.
mean, damn, man. You asked for the answer. I gave it to you. He just smudged me off to the side.
I'm just, I mean, even Dallas with Gafford and Lively. I mean, nobody really has an answer for
Grant, I hope you could appreciate the answer that I provided as such. You know what I'm saying? I would think that it's a great answer. Matter of fact, I think Dallas fans might adopt me as being as part of their fan base for such a reason if they don't become the number one seed in the Western Conference.
You go on down to Texas. You go on down to Texas, brother. I ain't mad at it. Well, Grant, I mean, your final thoughts on this tier, just, kind of like where do you see it all kind of like shaking out based on some of our rebuttals here as well, too? Obviously, Dallas has your heart and you feel like that's there, too. But do you share any of my concerns about Denver, or are you more on Cal's side and feel like, hey, you know what? They're still one of the, well, not one of, we know they're one of the better teams, but, they're not going to be as taking the step back that I'm predicting.
I think for the most part, Denver, I do have similar concerns. I also I did cover the Olympics, and I talked to some people like with Team Canada, and just definitely felt like Jamal Murray shouldn't have played like in the Olympics. Like it meant a lot to him, like to be able to be on the floor. He's someone that struggled to be available. Like even like the year prior with the FIBA World Cup, he wasn't available to play, and he really wanted to be part of it. So that's a little iffy to me, like his durability for the whole NBA season. That's like, I'm not sure the latest on his like physical condition and everything, and like how he's looking. But like, for a whole year, like a season long, with him, I just, and also Michael Porter Jr. with his injury history from the past, not necessarily last season or, last two seasons, but just in general, those two guys are always people that I'm like, kind of like Kyrie Irving, like where I'm always like, okay, I got to see if you're going to have that 12 to, whatever game absence. Like, I think, but to add a little bit more, I think that point about the Southwest Division, I think that's very, very accurate. I think you're a lot of talented teams that want to win, like on the schedule for the Mavericks on a nightly basis. I do think to add a little bit of insight for, my understanding of the team, at least last year for the Mavericks, Kyrie had this like really uncharacteristic stretch just because of like, what I'd mentioned with injuries and stuff, where he played like, I think 27 straight games through the, like coming out of the All-Star break all the way through until they clinched the 5 seed. And then they sat him, like allowed him to rest for the last 2. So I think they are going to always favor the home court advantage. That's a huge motivation for them, because in the Luka era, when they went to the conference finals those 2 times, they were the 5 seed. They had to really overcome like we're the underdog, we're not favored, we're on the road to start the series, and making the finals. That's one hell of a thing to have to be the road team for game 1 and 2 for 4 series in a row. So they understand just how valuable that's going to be. And they've talked about that as well, like kind of subtly, not like outright saying from the mountaintop, we need to be a home court advantage team, but they've kind of thrown in there, like Jason Kidd and, Luka at times has been like, like get home court. So I think like, that's going to be a motivational factor for them if they have to value, should we rest for durability or should we go for home court? I think they'll value the latter. So that's kind of my baked into my estimation for the Mavericks. I had those same questions about the Nuggets, but I think for the Thunder, as you had mentioned about their regular season, I expect them probably to be the number 1 seed, because they had so much, advantages with health, being a younger team. And I think just from an organizational standpoint, they are really good at solving I guess you could say the math game, or the sustainability approach of like what strategy is going to be the most efficient, our play style, get the 3 volume up, what style, is going to have the most or the best points expected allowed for defense. But I think where I have a little bit of pause with them is I need to see them prove it more in a playoff series. I felt like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was just too much like left to have to do everything offensively against the Mavericks. Part of that, of course, was back to my strategy, like explanation of their defense, was disrespecting guys like Josh Giddey as a shooter. But now I do, in a way, feel like them like committing to having Isaiah Hartenstein plays into the Mavericks' benefit to an extent, because they've always been an effective defense when there is at least one lesser shooting threat on the court, whether that's a center, whether that's a underwhelming perimeter shooter, where I think, they're probably going to live with, we're going to still beat you on the boards and you're just going to have a harder time getting into the paint regardless. So I think I do like the additions that they made. Caruso, I think, is great. Hartenstein, I think, is great. But just from an individual matchup standpoint, I still think Mavericks and Nuggets are better equipped against the Thunder than, the opposite of that, where Oklahoma City has like found their answers for those teams. Definitely curious to see like if Jalen Williams takes that step forward. As you guys, touched on, I think that changes it a little bit in the playoffs, of course. Same with Chet Holmgren. If one of those guys, I'm really waiting for them to make that big step forward where they have that really reliable second option. I think Jalen Williams was great last year, but there was just not enough of an answer when they needed it most against Dallas. And I still think that is the case until I see it like in reality, like in that high stakes moment. I think they'll end up being a great team, just needs more of those playoff runs together to really like see how it looks, especially with changing the complexion of their front court, with Chet and Hartenstein together.
All right, so, Grant, let's get right into it, man. Who do you have coming out of the West? Is it going to be defending Western Conference, champions, Dallas Mavericks, or do you think that the outcome may play a little bit differently?
I think if I'm picking it now, I do think the Mavericks is probably my most likely pick. I can definitely see the downsides of all those top teams. So I'm not like take it to the bank type of statement on that one, but definitely do think I'm probably picking the Mavericks as my most likely one right now.
Shaw.
Yep. OKC. I just believe in what SGA has been able to do. I trust Dagenau as a coach. And I think just the additions and Jay Williams, Chet Holmgren, again, taking proverbial leaps this year. Yes, they will struggle, I guess, with some of the size that's in the Western Conference, but I believe in their ability to solve those things and get some better offense execution outside of SGA, especially when it comes to playoff time. Your thoughts, CL?
Yeah. So not that I'm trying to be down on the Oklahoma City Thunder at all. I think they exercise demons and get as far as the Western Conference Finals, but then they will run into the Dallas Mavericks. And I think Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, I just think that is such a formidable group that I just think it's too much to overcome in the second year iteration of what the OKC Thunder does. Now, if during the course of the year, SGA and Williams and those guys, by leaps and bounds show that they are capable of running with those type of big dogs, meaning watching what they do in their head-to-head matchups, that could give me reasons to think differently about that. I think it's baby steps. I think what they need to do is they need to get to the Western Conference Finals. You cannot be a top seed, can't be a number one seeded team again this year, and people are still saying that you guys are true not number one seeds and stuff. I know they don't have to listen to that noise. I'm just saying I would understand why that's the sentiment, because when you look at how that team is built, it looks like they're built to win a ton of games, but against the teams that are going to cause mismatches, they need that much more of a better performance from their star players, and they may be too young to understand how to get to that point just yet. And I think if the roadblock is going to be playing either the Denver Nuggets or playing the Dallas Mavericks, I still think that it's going to be a roadblock, but it doesn't mean that they will not make themselves closer to having that kind of thought process or sentiment that they deserve to be in the Western Conference Finals, or that they should be playing in the NBA Finals if they're able to do such things. I just think that the Dallas Mavericks, with this version of Irving, with hopefully an improved Luka, I think that they're going to wind up being the team to beat yet again.
All right. Well, Grant, we thank you so much for tapping in here with us here on the Baseline for this Western Conference preview. Tell the people where they can find your work. What do you have going on next here as you're covering the Mavericks and the NBA throughout the course of this regular season?
Yeah, for sure. I'm doing a combination of stuff, a lot of daily Mavericks content on DallasHoopsJournal.com. It's a Substack, that had started in the off season. And then also just a lot of just general NBA content, like one-on-one interviews with guys like recently, like Lauri Markkanen, Marcus Smart and Zach Edey, basically the teams that are coming to play the Mavericks and sometimes Mavericks players. I'll be doing those on sportskita.com. And then, some later down the road this season, some like occasional things on Bleacher Report as well. But yeah, definitely a lot of Mavericks on DallasHoopsJournal.com for sure.
Well, Grant, we hope we're able to get you on at some point during the course of the regular season. But thank you so much for, hopping on board, for helping shake things up in our preseason rankings. I think we would have been too much kumbaya and all is together now had it not been for you. We appreciate you mixing things up and making things so much more interesting because you know me, I'm just so mundane with my preseason selections as Shaw may have alluded to.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I definitely look forward to having more throughout the course of the season for sure.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown. Brother Shaw. What more can be said, man? Great conversation with our man Grant Afseth, who covers the Dallas Mavericks. But, listen, there's no what I appreciate is that there is no high level of biasness, so to speak. Like the intent is to prop up the Dallas Mavericks. You should prop up the Dallas Mavericks because they proved that they were one of the best teams in the Western Conference last year, second half of that season, going all the way to the NBA Finals. And there's no reason for you to not think otherwise. But I think I equally respect the fact that he looks at the landscape of those other top tier teams and he says, listen, it's still not going to be an easy climb come next year, despite what we saw from the Dallas Mavericks. There are teams there that are going to have a say as to whether or not this will be an easy path to get back there again, or they're going to run into some roadblocks.
Yeah, the West is loaded. It's loaded at the top. It's loaded at the bottom. In the middle, as we alluded to. So I think for those, if you're just kind of tapping in, where we landed, a lot of rebound teams: San Antonio, Utah, and Portland. Play in Sacramento, Houston, and the Clippers. Middle of the pack, the chunkiest of the tiers: Minnesota, the Lakers, the Warriors, the Pelicans, and the Grizzlies. And our contenders: OKC, Dallas, Denver, and the Phoenix Suns. And I think as Grant was talking about Dallas specifically, yeah, he's tied in, he's locked into that. He knows a little bit more about them, but they did have a miraculous run, if you will, not miraculous, but an improved run that got them to the NBA Finals, especially after the All-Star break. So this is a team that should be able to have a certain level of success early on because everybody's there from the very beginning now. So Dallas is right there in the mix, as is OKC, as is Denver, and maybe even to a lesser degree the Phoenix Suns. As always, love to hear what our friends and family have to say about this. Please tap in. Let us know in the comments. Where did we get it wrong? Where would you have slot? Cal's Lakers now. That's going to be a thing for the entirety of the season. And I guess, my Grizzlies, as Cal thinks the Grizzlies are the 13th best team in the Western Conference. So let us know in the comments. Hit us up on our social media platforms. As always, man, the Baseline is always rocking with y'all.
Real quick, Shaw, I meant to ask you, do you think that the San Antonio Spurs are much closer to play-in ready than lottery round ready? I'm just saying, I know that we discussed, what'll happen if things don't go the way it does. But what I'm saying is that gap that we're talking about, as equally as I was dropping the Memphis Grizzlies, I was also elevating the San Antonio Spurs. I'm just curious if you think that they are play-in worthy of such with the currently constructed team and with the high elevated levels of expectation about how we see Victor Wembanyama being that force.
Yeah, Wemby might be the rising tide, right? That lifts all ships here. And San Antonio is going to have to figure that out in short order, how quick that is going to happen with veteran guys and Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes in tow. But if they realize it's not quite ready, then they need to abandon ship, pun intended, relatively quickly. And then, try to see if they can get into that top one or top two, pick situation. And I think it would be devastating. I mean, the league would hate them for years to come if they were able to land Cooper Flag and pair him alongside Wemby. So if I'm San Antonio, I think you've done what you needed to do to show Wemby some semblance of good faith by getting some veteran guys there. Chris Paul is obviously going to help, Stephen Vassell, from UConn in whatever time that he has there to kind of groom him as well too. And that will bode well for the San Antonio Spurs in the future. But if it's me, listen, not that I'm trying to piss Wemby off, but I'd be trying to get into that, into that top one, number two pick again, if possible. But, we'll see how things go here in the early part of the season. Those first 15 games will determine a lot of things for the Spurs.
Well, I appreciate the confidence that you have in your San Antonio Spurs as well, too.
No, that's our boy Nunzio, San Antonio Spurs.
Shout out to our man Nunes.
Sir.
Anyway, for those who've been watching, thank you for hopping on board with us this week. For those who've been listening, thank you for hopping on board with us this week. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.